I hold the coin up to the sterile, fluorescent light of the checkout lane. It's a beautiful silver dollar, rare, with a satisfying weight in my palm. The man on the other side of the counter, the one wearing the blue vest and a name tag that's seen better days, freezes. His knuckles are white where he's gripping the scanner. He knows that coin. He knows it intimately. It used to be his. I watch his face crumble, slow-motion demolition of a man who once held absolute power over me. His eyes, which used to burn with rage, are now just hollow. And in that moment, as I stand there in his checkout line at Walmart, I know that my revenge isn't just complete. It's a living, breathing thing that I get to feed every single week. If you believe that justice is a dish best served ice cold, and that sometimes the best revenge is watching your tormentor's world unravel piece by painful piece, then you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because you are not going to want to miss a single detail of how a monster who destroyed my childhood ended up begging for a manager in his own checkout line. Let's dive in. My story begins when I was 15. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. My world revolved around the scent of plywood and grip tape, the satisfying thud of my skateboard landing a trick on the half-pipe I'd built with my own two hands in our garage. It was in the rustle of comic book pages, the glow of a Game Boy screen, and the weight of a fantasy novel that promised worlds far away from my own. These weren't just things. They were my escape, my identity. Then, he entered the picture. My mom met him on a dating website. The first time I shook his hand, my gut screamed. It was a cold, firm handshake, but his eyes were what set off the alarms. They didn't see me, a 15-year-old kid. They scanned me, assessed me, and dismissed me, all in a single chilling glance. 2 months later, he moved in, and the life I knew began to be systematically erased. The first casualty was my garage. One afternoon, I came home from school, my head full of plans to finally nail a new trick. I threw open the garage door, and my heart stopped. It was gone. All of it. My skateboards, my BMX bike, the half-pipe that had taken me an entire summer to build, the ramps, even my ice hockey gear from the year before. The space was swept clean, sterile, empty. He was standing there, arms crossed, with a smirk that I would come to know and despise. I just stared at the empty space, my voice caught in my throat. Where is all my stuff?" He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Took it to the dump. I'm not having all your crap cluttering up my garage." His garage. He'd lived there for 3 weeks. The words hit me harder than any physical blow. It wasn't just about the stuff, it was a declaration of ownership. He owned the space, and by extension, he was beginning to own us. I looked to my mom, who was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, a dish towel in her hands. She just looked at her feet. Her silence was his permission. That was the first crack in my world. The next one shattered it. About 2 months later, we were at the dinner table. I finished my meal and, out of habit, stood up to take my plate to the sink. A hand shot out and grabbed my shirt, yanking me back down into my chair. "Where do you think you're going?" He snarled, his face inches from mine. To the kitchen," I stammered. "You don't get up from this table until you ask to be excused," he said, his voice low and menacing. Before I could even process the demand, his fist shot into my stomach. It wasn't a tap. It was a full-force punch that knocked the wind out of me, folding me in half. I gasped, tears springing to my eyes, a searing pain radiating through my gut. I looked at my mom again, pleading with my eyes. She just started clearing the other plates, her movements stiff and unnatural. She said nothing. That was the moment I realized I was completely, utterly alone. From there, it was open season. The beatdowns became a regular occurrence. Punishments for perceived slights to his fragile authority. Not looking him in the eye? A slap across the face. Taking too long in the shower? Pinned against the wall. It was a reign of terror, and he was the king of our silent, terrified little castle. But the physical abuse was only part of his campaign. He needed to break my spirit, to erase who I was. One day, He set his sights on my inner world. I came home to find him in my room, holding my prized binder of Pokemon cards, the one with the holographic Charizard I'd traded half my collection for. "What is this?" he spat, the words dripping with contempt. 15-year-old boys should be out playing football, trying to get on the baseball team, not being a fag nerd playing with Pokemon cards. Before I could say a word, he started tearing them in half. The Charizard, the Blastoise, the Venusaur. Years of collecting, of trading, of joy, ripped to shreds in front of my eyes. But he wasn't done. He grabbed my comic book collection, the long boxes filled with Spider-Man and X-Men. He took my Game Boy and my PS2, all the games I'd saved up for, my entire library of sci-fi and fantasy books. He took it all, not to the dump this time. He just made it disappear. He probably sold it for pennies. I don't know. All I knew was that my room, my sanctuary, was now just as empty as the garage. The most twisted part of it all? This man, this monster, was a middle school teacher. During his off time, he refereed and umpired local sports games. He stood on fields and courts, a pillar of the community, enforcing rules and mentoring young athletes, then came home and terrorized a child. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. My mom was a ghost in her own home. She became his willing accomplice. He convinced her to stop giving me lunch money. His reasoning, which he said right in front of me, was, "The little shit will just spend it on comics and other gay shit." So I started going hungry. The hunger gnawed at me. It was a constant dull ache that made it impossible to focus in class. It was a physical manifestation of my powerlessness. One day, the hunger was too much. I saw his change jar on the dresser, overflowing with coins. My hands trembled as I reached in and fished out what I could. It was maybe $3 and some change, just enough for a slice of pizza and a fruit punch from the school cafeteria. It felt like a feast, but I had a twin sister, and she, to put it mildly, was an asshole. She'd spent our entire childhood blackmailing me into doing her chores. That week, I'd finally had enough. I refused to do her laundry. So, she played her trump card. She went straight to him and told him about the change jar. I'll never forget the look on his face. It was pure, triumphant rage. But he didn't just yell. He didn't just hit me. He picked up the phone and called the police. He stood there, stone-faced, and told the officers that I had stolen from him. He wanted to press larceny charges against his 15-year-old stepson. For $3. The cops were clearly uncomfortable, but they took a report. The moment their car pulled away from the curb, he unleashed hell. He beat me senseless. It wasn't just a punch to the gut this time. It was a flurry of fists and feet, a red haze of pain until I was curled up on the floor, protecting my head. That was the point I broke. I waited until they were asleep, packed a few things in a backpack, and ran. The next few years are a blur of misery. I was found, returned, and ran away again. He tried to convince my mom to send me to military school, to ship me off for good. Between the runaway attempts and the larceny charge, I ended up celebrating my 16th birthday in a juvenile detention center. I was a child, a victim, but the system saw a delinquent. I spent the rest of my teenage years miserable and afraid. The thought of suicide was a frequent, comforting visitor. It felt like the only way out. Once I was finally out on my own, I cut contact. I didn't speak to my mom for several years. I needed to build a life where I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. I got a job, got my own place, and I discovered the gym. Weightlifting became my new therapy. With every pound I lifted, I was building more than muscle. I was building a fortress. I was ensuring that no man would ever lay a hand on me again, without a serious fight. Eventually, my mom and I reconciled. By then, she and the monster had married. I was a different person. I was bigger, stronger, and carried myself with a confidence I had earned through pain. When he saw me, the dynamic had shifted. The old habit of acting like he was going to punch me just to see me flinch was gone. He didn't dare. We settled into a cold, silent truce, avoiding each other at family gatherings, two planets in a hostile orbit. Then came the turning point. The event that would, years later, deliver justice to my doorstep. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Facing her own mortality, something inside her finally snapped. She realized she didn't want to spend another second of the precious time she had left with the man who had enabled so much pain. She had a lawyer draft a separation agreement. It was surprisingly generous. He would receive a lump sum of money, and he would have 45 days to retrieve all of his personal belongings from the house. And here's a crucial detail. Years earlier, before they'd even started dating, he had blown through his entire inheritance in 6 months and had been forced to sell his childhood home, his mother's house, to settle his debts. My mother, who had her own money, had quietly bought that very house back from the bank before they married. In the separation, she let him keep it. He moved back into the house he grew up in, a house that was only his because of her. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation. In her grief and declining health, she had been letting him bend the rules of the agreement, allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal, long after the deadline had passed. When she was gone, I was the executor of her estate, and the first thing I did was put an immediate final end to his visits. The 45-day deadline to remove his personal effects was long past. Legally, everything he had left in my mother's house now belonged to the estate, which meant it belonged to me, to dispose of as I saw fit. And oh, did I see fit? I walked through the house, taking inventory, and I discovered my stepfather had hobbies of his own. Expensive ones. His vintage baseball card collection? Sold. It fetched around $40. His extensive, autographed sports memorabilia, signed jerseys, helmets, framed photos, sold. That brought in another $11. His entire workshop of high-end woodworking equipment, along with several beautiful finished pieces of furniture he'd made, all sold. Another. I didn't sell everything, though. Some things were too personal. I kept his mother's engagement ring, a stunning platinum band with 3 diamonds, roughly 2 carats, and her wedding band. I also kept his extensive coin collection because, as fate would have it, I also collect coins. I knew the value of what I held. The rest, some tools, some odds and ends, I kept for myself. The money was nice, but it was never about the money. It was about erasure. It was about showing him what it felt like to have the things you love, the things that define you, ripped away without your consent. For a long time, that was enough. But the universe had more justice in store. About a month ago, I was at the grocery store. As I was heading to the checkout, I saw him. He was older, grayer, a little stooped. But it was him. A plan, cold and perfect, instantly formed in my mind. I paid for my things and waited. As he was pushing his cart out toward the parking lot, I approached him. "Hey," I said, my voice even. He turned, and a flicker of confusion crossed his face before it hardened into his signature scowl. "What do you want?" he grunted. "I just wanted to let you know," I said, keeping my tone light and conversational. "I sold your baseball cards. And the sports memorabilia.
Got a pretty good price for them, actually.
Your woodworking tools, too. They're all gone." For a second, he just stared at me, his brain trying to process the words. Then his face turned a mottled, furious red. It was the face I remembered from my childhood. He bellowed, a wordless roar of pure rage, and took a swing at me. I was ready. I already had my phone in my hand, my thumb hovering over the 911 button. His punch was clumsy, slow. I stepped back easily. He swung again, and again a wild, pathetic flurry. He was a man in his 60s, nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago. The few punches that connected felt like nothing against the man I had become. I was no longer a skinny, terrified 15-year-old. As he continued to try and hit me, I calmly dialed 911. "Yes, I'm in the parking lot of the Food Lion on Main Street. There's a man assaulting me." Hearing my voice on the phone sent him into another stratosphere of rage. He abandoned punching me and started ramming his grocery cart, over and over, into the side of my brand new Toyota. Clang, scrape, clang. It was music to my ears. He was just adding charges to the list. The police pulled into the parking lot. As he was actively denting my door, they saw everything. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. The fallout was swift and spectacular. He lost his teaching job at the local middle school. And with a conviction, he lost his pension. He'd never learned to save a dime while married to my mother, and he had to hire an expensive lawyer, foolishly thinking he could beat a charge with multiple witnesses and video evidence. He ended up having to sell his mother's house, the very one my mom had given him, just to pay his legal bills. The social ruin was even more complete. My nephew, who was on the high school football team, made sure every one of his friends knew the story. That Mr. Stepfather's name, the respected referee, had not only just been convicted of assault, but had also spent years beating his uncle as a child. Parents started calling the league, demanding he resign from refereeing and umpiring. His public reputation was incinerated. My niece and my girlfriend's younger sister both go to the middle school where he worked. They told me he was universally despised by the students. They said when he came to the school to clear out his classroom, he made a huge scene, yelling at the administration, and ended up hysterically crying as he walked out of the building for the last time. He reached out to his own son, who he had also been abusive towards. His son refused to take him in or help him out in any way. So now, the man who called me a nerd, who tried to break me, who lived in a house paid for by my mother's family, now lives in a crappy little trailer in the worst neighborhood in town. And to pay the rent, he had to take a job as a cashier at Walmart. Even though it's not the closest one to my house, that is now the only Walmart I will ever shop at. The first time I went through his line, he tried to scan several items twice to overcharge me. I called him on it immediately. "Hey, I think you scanned that milk twice." He tried to argue, saying I was mistaken. I smiled politely and said, "Could we get a manager over here, please, just to be sure?" The manager voided the charge, believing it was an accident, but he learned his lesson. The second time, he was overwhelmingly rude, sighing and muttering under his breath. I was nothing but polite. "Sir, is there a problem?" I asked, loud enough for others to hear. The people in line behind me chimed in, saying he was being a jerk. I asked for a manager again. He got a formal warning for his customer service. Every time I go there now, every time I step into his line, I see him die a little more inside. That hollow look in his eyes deepens, and it gives me a satisfaction that money could never buy. Sometimes, for fun, I'll say I'm paying with exact change. I'll pull out a handful of coins from my pocket. As I'm about to hand him the money, I'll pause. "Oh, I didn't realize I had this 1884cc Morgan silver dollar in my pocket," I'll say, examining a rare coin from his old collection. "Wow, can't spend this. I guess I'll just use my credit card." I just sold his expensive professional-grade ratcheting wrench set online. Next Monday, when I know he's working, I'm going to go buy my daughter one of those big, fancy, above-ground pools. I'm going to push the massive box onto his conveyor belt, and as he's ringing it up, I'm going to smile and say, "I know my daughter is just going to love this pool." It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway. They say living well is the best revenge. I disagree. The best revenge is living well and making absolutely sure your tormentor has a front row seat to watch you do it. He didn't just want to hurt me, he wanted to erase me. Now my very existence is his punishment, and I get to deliver it, one grocery trip at a time. What an incredible story of patience and poetic justice. The universe has a funny way of balancing the scales, doesn't it? What's the most satisfying karma or revenge you've ever personally witnessed? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate vindication, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who appreciates a story where the villain gets exactly what they deserve. Thanks for listening.